Welcome back everyone. So today, right now, you're going to hit that subscribe button because we're going to be talking about all the new tanks that are in 2.7 Red Skies, the upcoming patch. And we're going to do this like I always do these videos in order of the nation, starting with the US, going on to Germany, and so on and so forth. If you want to hear about the planes, I should have already made a video about that, so be sure to go check my video list. And if you want to hear about only your favorite nation, there should be timestamps to jump directly to that. So first off, starting with the United States, they actually didn't get any new tanks. So I'll take this time to talk about a new function to all tanks, well, most tanks, using in a US tank, the Striker. This new function is the commander sights. It's a third way to view things, opposed to binoculars or the gunner sights, or I guess regular third person, so I guess you could say it's a fourth way. What it does is it kind of steals some functions that were in the binoculars and are now in the commander sights. Primarily now that if your tank had commander thermals, they are now only in the commander sights and not in the binoculars. Binoculars don't get any thermals or night vision or anything like that. Those would now only be for what binoculars are normally used for, viewing things at a distance. Now, if you want to use the thermal visions for the commander, you have to use them in the commander sights, which kind of function a lot like binoculars, but they're a bit closer to the tank. Kind of depends on what tank, where they are at, but they also have a much slower traverse. I guess the idea here would be that your commander isn't sticking his head out of the tank, but they also still do give you that broader field of view than the regular gun sight, and you can look around without moving the turret. Also often seems to be that you have a bit more zoom than you would with your regular gun sights. Another function you can do, of course, is range find with them, but if you turn on, and you have to bind this, I don't know what the regular binding is, aim mode, the entire turret will move with your commander sights. And this is used for if you want to shoot at enemy vehicles from the commander view, as once again, it can give you a nice larger zoom, not on all tanks, but a good number of tanks, they'll give you a nice larger zoom. However, you cannot adjust the angle of your gun, just what it's pointing at. The way you would adjust the angle of it is by using a rangefinder, and then you can click and shoot. Now, if you don't want to click and shoot, you just turn the aim mode off, and it goes back to only move the commander sights, where if you click, that turns the turret like it does in the binoculars. Now, this is in some ways a benefit because you have this nifty way of aiming from not necessarily a third person, but a different point of view than the regular gun with a wider field of view. However, it also has some negatives. For example, it has much lower traverse. That's the main one, but another few are that now you have another field of view to look through, which can make things a bit more complicated, ripping you on a PlayStation controller. Another thing I've noticed is that they're not stabilized. Maybe on some tanks they are, I haven't found any that they are, but on the Striker, for example, I'm testing on, they're not stabilized, so God forbid you run into any bumps or try to range find while on the move and miss the target. But another thing it does is because of the limited traverse, you might not want to use the commander sights, but now your binoculars don't have thermals, so you kind of have to use the other ones. There's some ups and downs. I don't think it's going to change gameplay too much, but I think it'll change it a slight bit. I think it'll make commander thermals actually less relied on, which in some senses would be a good thing. Even the playing field for the many vehicles that don't have them. Now, another thing to keep in mind is not all tanks can do the aim mode. Only certain, mostly modern ones can. And I believe not all tanks are actually getting the commander sights either. Many non-modern tanks are getting those as well. It's an interesting change, and we'll have to see where it goes from here. It doesn't really introduce any new gameplay aspects besides most of the things we have in game already there. A lot of times people use binoculars to line up their gun with a target that they can't necessarily see through the gun sight, and then click and then just shoot while being there. So being able to click and shoot on things isn't really a big deal. Another thing they did is they made it so when you range find things, I think it might be only with laser rangefinders, but I don't know, is that the gun will automatically, at least on certain mostly modern tanks, automatically line up with the distance that you range find. Personally, I don't entirely like that. I'm fine with scrolling for like the momentary of a second to have to do that, and having to automatically range find, because sometimes I want to range find something that's not actually at the target but near the target, but it's no really big deal. Some people were saying taking gameplay away from it, but scrolling for a second isn't that much of an issue, and the thing has been in sim for a while and no one's been complaining, so I think it's good. I think we're fine. Now let's get on with the new tanks added. As I said, there was none for the US, but for Germany we have the Marder A1, which is a German-made IFV armed with a 20mm cannon similar to the one on the, actually I think it is the exact same one on the Leopard 2K. It also has a Malin ATGM, which has 4 total ATGMs of, and 2 7.62 machine guns. One as a coaxial for the main cannon, and one as some sort of strange rear turret that can't actually turn all the way around. It being an IFV, you would assume it's for shooting infantry, but in War Thunder, it'll probably be used to shoot planes, or be annoying. Armor-wise, of course, IFV, no armor. Speed-wise, it's alright. It does not have a stabilizer, and it is only at 7.3. I think because it does not have any stabilizer, they've justified the 7.3 battle rating, but honestly, with the ATGM, it might be able to go up, though it is only 4 of them, and then you have to rely on only a 20mm. And at 7.3, there's quite a few tanks that can resist it quite well. And unlike the R3, you're not a very small target. However, though, it does look pretty cool, especially with the desert camo. So while I normally dunk on German tanks because of some sort of bizarre hatred I have for people who play Germany, I actually kind of want this tank. It looks pretty cool, kind of fun. Though I find its placement in the tech tree a little odd. It's right before the BMP one. Personally, I feel like it should be after the BMP one. The other tank that Germany got was the TAM-2 IP, and it is a TAM-2 at 8.7. It looks kind of like if a TAM and the Canadian Leo had a bizarre child. It's armed with a 105 that can shoot at best DM33 with 400mm of penetration, which is really good and has a laser rangefinder, but it doesn't have any thermals. And when compared to plenty of other 8.7 premiums out there, or even tech tree vehicles, you'd expect it to at least have thermals. It is the dev server though, so perhaps it will have thermals in the future. It's also not exactly that fast. Probably been weighed down by all of that excess external composite armor that really isn't going to protect you against a whole lot besides poorly aimed heat shells. Though in real life, it'd probably do pretty well against improvised anti-tank weaponry. A concerning factor is, why is Argentina making tanks that are designed against improvised anti-tank weaponry? For Canada, it makes sense because they go do bad things in the Middle East with the rest of NATO. But Argentina, from my point of view, I don't think they do that much at all. Unless the tank is meant for export. Hopefully it's meant for export. Russia did not get any new tanks either. However, the United Kingdom did. They got the Concept 3. Just an idea. A very early prototype of the Roycott, armed with a 76mm cannon, the same one on the Comet, though it does not have the APDS. Probably for the best, because what it does have is a laser rangefinder, and is only at 4.3. Now, those are strong positives, however, it also has some strong weaknesses. Mainly, it's low armor and not so great top speed. About off-road, you're going to get 40 kilometers an hour. That on top of having only the AP shells and not the APDS shell for the quickfire 77mm, which is actually 76, many people have a pretty downer attitude about the tank. However, I feel that its strengths are strong enough to keep it to be probably a really good vehicle and its own battle rating. Having a laser rangefinder at such a low battle rating will definitely make it so you have a strong advantage over anyone else when it comes to long range engagements. If anyone else tried to strike you on a large map like Kursk or the new one coming up, Red Sands, even if it takes you a little bit longer to get to the destination, when you do get there, you'll definitely be able to outdo anyone else who is firing directly at you. You could even sit out in the open and still be able to strike the enemies before they're able to find how far you are. In some senses, you could consider it OP. However, if you were to up-tier the tank any higher than it currently is, it would be kind of useless because only having the AP rounds at long ranges, they don't have a whole lot of penetration. Though, despite it not actually being able to function at higher battle ratings, I still would consider this thing power creep. We're bringing some pretty strong equipment, laser rangefinders, down to the battle rating of 4.3, where it's going to fight on a bad day Tigers, but more commonly Panzer IVs. Although it's not going to be too OP, it does not have a stabilizer, and any cramped small map probably won't do that well, thanks to its not great top speed. Though I don't think it's going to do horrible on small maps, because it still can get around and it has a pretty good gun. I would not be surprised though, however, if the battle rating went up a bit. Not too much though. It struggles at a distance from penetrating Tiger 2s, so it couldn't really face those on a common basis. Japan's new tank at 4.3 is an M47, which personally I feel is inappropriate. Japan never actively served the M47. They only ever evaluated it and judged that it's too heavy to travel across their land so much. That's why they made the Type 61 so small and lightly armored, so it could get around Japan pretty fast on the back of a train. The M47 was too big for that. That's what their evaluation said. So why is it in the tech tree? In a gameplay sense, it actually makes a lot of sense. It's 7.3 right before the STB1, and it's a solid tank. It has the same ammunition as the Type 61, however, it has more armor. Functionally, in the tech tree, it doesn't really line up with anything too well besides perhaps the R2Y2s, which is pretty good. And if you really were a masochist, you could take it out with the Type 60 ATM and the whole reproduction. Though a whole reproduction fighting T-55 AMs is wrong. Personally, I think a better choice would have been to research the STBs a little bit more. I'm pretty sure the actual STB1 did not have some of the ammunition that it currently has in game, which could have possibly been used to justify adding an STB that was at 7.3, and then we could have a few others. I think in total there's about 6 STBs. Currently they're all bundled into the STB1. However, unfortunately, my knowledge of that subject is kind of limited, and even if you were to take away the stabilizer and laser rangefinder and maybe even the heat FS, it'd be kind of hard to justify putting it at 7.3. China got 3 new tanks, starting off with their premium at 8.3, the WMA 301, which is essentially a PTL2 but with a bigger gun, and turrets different, of course, for the bigger bigger gun. Because it has a bigger gun, it can fire different ammunition, including better APFSDS Type 83, which has a flat pen of 337 millimeters, much better than the 220 on the PTL-02. But that's not all. It also had proximity fused anti-air flak shells and could fire ATGMs out of its main cannon that penetrate 750 millimeters. Altogether, a very nice tank. However, it had one downside. The commander sights did not have thermals. Despite this, it still has a higher battle rating of 8.3. I'm pretty sure besides that, everything else is the same, speeds and all. The other vehicles they got were two radar-assisted SPAGs. The PGZ-09 at 8.3 is kind of just the Chinese Gepard. It is armed with two 35mm PG-99 35-2 cannons. Besides that, it's not anything too special to other radar SPAGs, besides perhaps maybe having a really low profile for the chassis, though the radar disc kind of makes that a moot point. It will definitely, though, serve China well. While their prior SPAG, the WZ-305, could definitely do the job handling enemy aircraft, having some radar assistance will definitely help, especially when the things get a little bit faster. Their other SPAG, though, a bit of a troubled child. It is the PGZ-04A. Was it actually the earlier model than the PGZ-09? I believe the PGZ-09 actually did have the possibility for addition of missiles, but it never got them. I guess the need never arose. While the PGZ-04A did have missiles installed, 4 HN-6 missiles, and its main cannons were 4 25mm PG-87 cannons. The cannons at max can penetrate 63 millimeters of armor, which for the most part isn't that impressive compared to some SPAGs who have dedicated APDS belts, but typically can get the job done, and most SPAGs don't get a whole lot of APDS anyways. The real issues come with the missiles. The HN-6 missiles currently in game suck real hard. You'll be lucky to get the plane down in the third hit. Sometimes they fly directly into the ground. I unfortunately feel that this is not going to be fixed, and this is going to be a consistent issue with all IR guided SAMs. I don't think it's necessarily the SAM's fault. I think Gaijin's programming algorithm for SAMs is just not that great. Now, there is a scenario where a lot of people think that maybe the missiles just suck and it's a bad vehicle. That's how most people feel with the Type 93, the Japanese pickup with some SAMs in the back. However, the scenario with that vehicle in many cases is that you more so just need to know when to fire. The missiles aren't magical and aren't going to always strike down the enemy targets like the mouse guided ones will. And for that reason, the Type 93 sits at 9.7. This vehicle, on the other hand, sits at 10.0, higher battle rating. It does have guns though, but does not have the speed or any of the other characteristics that the Type 93 has. In all regards, probably doesn't deserve the battle rating that it has, because at the end of the day, you are more of a SPAG than a SAM. Now, apparently, according to Mike Goes Boom, the missiles work better against helicopters. However, helicopters have a lot of flares. I'm sure if the helicopter is doing something stupid or too close to the battlefield, you'll probably get some kills. And you can get kills with the missiles in this thing against jets just fine, sort of. If you shoot at the right time, when the misjet is aligned perfectly with the stars, it's just not likely to happen. And when compared to other infrared guided SAMs, the missiles are notably worse. For example, if we go over to the next nation we're going to talk about, Italy, the Sidam 25 Mistral actually did get a bit of an upgrade. You can now fire the Mistrals well on the move. And if you were to go test that thing out, probably get a few kills, 1 or 2. Well, there's only 2 jets to kill in a test drive. Despite this large change in performance, the two SAMs share the same battle rating. Now, I'm not saying that one needs to be down tiered in any sense. I just hope that Gaijin makes the missiles not suck. It's annoying when the missile doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Or perhaps you're supposed to only use them against helicopters, which isn't entirely reasonable because helicopters typically sit far outside your infrared missile range and they have flares and all that fun stuff. Now, an improvement to the Mistral wasn't the only thing the Italians received. They also got a new IFE, the Dardo IFE, which when I was streaming and before the stream had died, some people in the comments were telling me that it was revolutionary or something along that lines. However, looking at the statistics of this, it is kind of just an Italian Bradley. It has the same ammunition as the Bradley. It doesn't seem a whole lot faster or slower than the Bradley. It has the same TOW2s and TOW2B ATGMs as the Bradley. The gun's not the same, but I have a feeling that that's just a difference in naming schemes because once again, the ammo is the same. It's M919 APFSDS as the top shell or APDS as the regular shells, which have the same amount of penetration. Like the Bradley has thermals. However, I don't know if it has commander sight thermals or not because it doesn't seem to have a commander sight, despite me seeing something that looks very much like a commander sight. Now, I don't think this is necessarily revolutionary. We already have the Bradley in game. However, to the Italians, or the Italian tech tree, probably is pretty revolutionary. It's definitely going to be a good vehicle because we know the M3A3 Bradley is a good vehicle. It was a definite need for the Italian tech tree though, so not to downplay it by any means, but it's not It's not like super amazing, guys. It's nothing new. It's definitely something needed though. Now, I'm pretty sure the Italians also had some other IFEs. Maybe it was the same one but with different modifications. Hopefully we'll see those in the future. The Dardo sits at the end of their tank destroyer line at 9.0 after the rocket box, or the M11-3A1. Although the battle rate is something to scoff at, because currently the M3A3 Bradley is only 8.7, yet the tanks are basically the same. For the last two nations, both France and Sweden, they got the same tank. I'm not going to pronounce the name because, oh god, ITO-90M. It is a camper van with a SAM system on the back that looks a little inappropriate, or maybe that's just me. Generally speaking, it's nothing all that interesting. It's a good vehicle for what it does. It is armed with the same VT-1 missile that the German battle bus is armed with, which definitely shoots down planes very easily. Speed-wise, it's kind of the same. There's not a whole lot else to say about the vehicle, besides perhaps you can use it to kill tanks if you shoot below them. Also, oddly enough, the missiles get deflected by the T-90A's APS system, which I'm pretty sure is supposed to only work on laser-guided ATGMs. So I guess guys just making things run by laser, but pretty sure they're supposed to be radar-guided. Regardless of that, what I find kind of funny is this thing has the same missiles as the German battle bus, as I said earlier, the VT-1s, but the German battle bus is at 10.0, while this one is at 10.7 for both nations. Now, there are a few ways you could justify this. For example, this one has 8 ready-to-go missiles, while the German one has to reload every once in a while. And the German one is also a bit bigger. But regardless, it is a fact to keep in mind. And that there is all the tanks. Now, there is one last thing to talk about. That would be the new map, Red Sands, which is a big old desert in Africa with one watery bit, but most of it is reddish sand. The map is quite interesting. It's very different than other maps we've seen in game. It's wide and open, but not too open. There's lots of structures that would block shots. You can't look directly at the enemy spawn. At least I wasn't able to. I didn't do the best inspection of the map. It's intended for top tier tank battles, laser rangefinders, thermal sights, and high velocity rounds. So having wide open fields would make sense in the context. Though to see if it's actually going to be a good map or a Cap-E simulator, we're gonna have to wait till we find it in the actual game. One thing I can say for sure is that it seemed like the airfields were a little close. There were many times where I was flying over it in a supersonic jet, and before I even reached the enemy airfield, it was already shooting at me. The map is pretty big, like 3 kilometers over, but even then still, it seems they're pretty close, often shooting into the map. And besides that, this is just about all the news there is for the new tanks that are coming in the next patch. So once again, a big thank you to my patrons, YouTube members, and Twitch subs. If you'd like to join them, there should be links below. Be sure to hit the bell icon to be notified anytime I upload anything. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day. In the terms of bonus news, real life research costs.